Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to look at how a modern archaeological mystery connects directly to an ancient empire that quite literally shaped the world. We so often think of history as this thing firmly locked away in dusty textbooks, but the reality? The ground beneath our feet is still actively revealing its secrets. Today, we're exploring the profound journey of Buddhism, not just as some ancient philosophy, but as a living, breathing narrative that is still being unearthed today.
Case in point, a recent excavation in the nondescript village of Zihenpora in Kashmir just revealed a stunning 2,000-year-old Buddhist site. It was such a monumental find that even PM Narendra Modi called it a proud moment, highlighting the region's incredibly rich cultural heritage. I mean, it just goes to show that history is absolutely still being written right now, right in our own backyards.
What actually emerged from the dirt were these incredible architectural remnants, specifically stupas and monastic buildings, dating all the way back to the Kushan period. But here's the truly wild part of the story. This site was actually tracked down thanks to some old, blurry photographs of 3 stupas that were just sitting around in a French museum. It was those photos that caught the attention of archaeologists, prompting them to dig into these mounds and reveal a totally lost piece of Kashmir's civilization.
Moving into Section 1, The Life of Gautama Buddha and the founder's incredible journey.
To really understand those newly unearthed monuments, we obviously have to understand the man who inspired them. Born in 563 BCE in Lumbini, Gautama Buddha actually started life as Prince Siddhartha. He was born into a noble Shakya family and lived a life of total luxury. But his path was defined by a few major, transformative milestones. You see, he was deeply moved by the shocking reality of human suffering that he witnessed outside his palace walls. By age 29, the stakes became just too high to ignore, and he made the monumental decision to completely renounce his worldly life. After wandering for years, he attained enlightenment at age 35, delivered his first sermon a year later, and passed away at 80, having completely transformed from a prince into the Enlightened One.
Because early Buddhism often relied on symbols rather than human depictions to tell the story, these icons hold immense power. The horse represents his great renunciation when he rode away from his palace in Kapilavastu, leaving absolutely everything he knew behind. And then there's the majestic Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, representing the exact spot where he finally attained ultimate knowledge and enlightenment after years of searching.
That brings us to Section 2, Core Teachings and the Philosophy of the Buddha.
To grasp his teachings, we really have to look at what he was rebelling against, namely the complex, highly ritualistic practices of ancient India. He wanted to offer something practical, something accessible. He taught that adapting to change and understanding the law of cause and effect, what we know as karma, could ultimately lead a person to nirvana. Now, nirvana isn't a physical place you go to, it's the ultimate liberation from the endless cycle of birth, suffering, and death. It's about breaking free. He taught that impermanence is just the baseline nature of life, and finding peace requires adapting to that change with a truly mindful approach.
To reach this state of liberation, he mapped out the 4 noble truths. Think of this almost like a medical diagnosis. First up is dukkha, simply acknowledging the hard reality that suffering exists in life. Second, samudaya, identifying that there's a specific cause for this suffering, which is usually our own cravings and desires. Third, nirodha, the hopeful prognosis that suffering can indeed be stopped. And finally, magga, the actual prescription or path to follow to make that suffering cease. It's a highly logical, deeply empathetic progression. So what exactly is that prescription? It's the Noble Eightfold Path, represented by the wheel, the Ashtangika Marga. This gives followers a practical, everyday guide to living. Notice how beautifully balanced it is into 3 main categories: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. It covers everything from having the right intentions and speaking truthfully, all the way to practicing right livelihood and focused meditation. It's basically a comprehensive blueprint for an ethical, mindful life.
And this brings us to a really fascinating concept. Absolutely nothing is lost in the universe. We call this the cycle of dependent origin. It shows exactly how our ignorance and karmic formations chain us to this continuous loop of becoming, birth, and eventually aging and death. It essentially maps out how past causes create present effects and how present actions create future effects. It's a really striking visualization of universal interconnectivity.
Let's move right into Section 3, the spread and the councils, and how a global religion emerges.
Transforming this deeply personal philosophy into a highly organized global religion? Well, that certainly didn't happen overnight. It required massive coordination through these epic Buddhist councils. Whenever there was a dispute or a need to compile teachings, a council was called. Right after the Buddha's death in 483 BCE, King Ajatasattu patronized the first council to preserve the core texts. Later on, the famous Emperor Ashoka drove the third council, and then Emperor Kanishka, ironically up in Kashmir, which brings us right back to our modern excavation story, held the fourth council, where Buddhism officially divided into the Hinayana and Mahayana sects.
You know, what really drove Buddhism's massive initial popularity was its radically accessible social order. Ancient India was completely dominated by a rigid varna, or caste system. Buddhism flatly rejected that. This Sangha, or monastic order, was open to absolutely everyone, regardless of caste or gender. You had monks and nuns devoting their entire lives to the teachings, supported by lay people, while pilgrims traveled vast distances just to gain spiritual knowledge. For its time, it was a truly revolutionary, inclusive community.
And this inclusive message absolutely exploded outward. Rulers like the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka didn't just practice Buddhism, they actively exported it. He sent out missionaries, including his own son and daughter, pushing the religion out of its Indian epicenter into Sri Lanka, Burma, and up through the Himalayas into China, Korea, and Japan. It rapidly became a truly pan-Asian cultural force.
Which leads us to Section 4, Decline and Lasting Legacy, exploring its enduring global impact.
This presents a pretty fascinating historical paradox. How on earth did a religion so incredibly successful abroad almost entirely vanish from its Indian birthplace? Well, the sheer irony is that the very things Buddhism initially rebelled against eventually crept right back into the monasteries. They started adopting complex rituals and idol worship. They abandoned Pali, the language of the everyday common people, in favor of elite Sanskrit. Monasteries accumulated massive wealth, which naturally led to corruption and social isolation from everyday folks. Couple that internal decay with brutal external invasions from groups like the Hunas and Turks, and the religion slowly began to fade from the Indian subcontinent.
But hey, do not mistake decline for disappearance. Despite fading in India, its legacy is absolutely monumental and woven directly into the fabric of the modern world. Buddhism fundamentally shaped universal concepts of nonviolence and equality. It pioneered massive global educational centers like the famous universities of Nalanda and Takshashila. And through its vast network of traveling monks and pilgrims, it was a massive driver of trade and cultural exchange along the ancient Silk Road. Which brings us right back full circle. As we think back to that stunning 2,000-year-old Kashmir excavation we discussed at the top of the explainer, it leaves us with this final lingering mystery to ponder. If an empire this vast and influential can recede into the earth, only to be rediscovered completely by chance from a blurry museum photo, what other forgotten empires and ancient truths are just waiting to be unearthed beneath the ground we walk on every single day? Keep questioning, keep digging, and thank you so much for exploring with us.